सुखदां मलयजशीतलां यशश्यामलां मातरं वन्दे मातरम्। शुभ्रज्योत्स्नापुलकितयामिनी पुल्लकुसुमितद्वदनशोभिनी सुहासिनी सुमधुरभाषिणी सुखदां मातरम् वन्दे मातरम् वन्दे मातरम्।
भारत माता की
जय।
थैंक यू ऑल। वसुदेव कुटुंबकम। G20 थीम वाज वन अर्थ वन फैमिली वन फ्यूचर। हम सभी ने देखा है कि ये एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्टोरिकल मूवमेंट न केवल हमने देखा, बस हमारी आने वाली पीढ़ियों तक ये याद रहेगी। 200 मीटिंग्स करीब 60 सिटीज में हुई, 1 लाख से ज्यादा डेलीगेशन आए, 125 कंट्री से ज्यादा डेलीगेशन आए। इतना बड़ा इतने बड़े मतलब व्यापक अरेंजमेंट G20 डेलीगेशन जो इंडिया ने कराया, ये अपने आप में काबिले तारीफ है। साथ ही साथ अगर हम G20 की बात करें तो G20 85% ऑफ ग्लोबल GDP इसके मेंबर्स कंट्रीब्यूट करते हैं और 2/3 ऑफ द वर्ल्ड पॉपुलेशन यही बिलोंग करती है। G20 में इस बार बहुत ही अच्छी चीजें हुई। एज एक्सपेक्टेड काफी लोग सोच रहे थे कि हमारा कॉन्सेंसस पेपर नहीं आएगा, हमारी डिक्लेरेशन पेपर नहीं आएगी, बस यस इट वाज 100% सबकी कंसेंसस रही, विदाउट एनी फुट नोट, विदाउट एनी चेयरमैन नोट। साथ ही साथ बहुत सारे नई डिक्लेरेशन स्टार्ट हुई, जैसे हमारा जो मेगा इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर की बात करते हैं, अफ्रीकन यूनियन को हमारे को मेंबर बनाया गया। अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट रसिया यूक्रेन का जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट को जिस हिसाब से हैंडल किया गया, सबकी एक्सेप्टेंस ली गई, वो काबिले तारीफ है। आने वाले टाइम में इसको काफी याद रखा जाएगा और जिस स्केल पे किया गया बहुत ही मेजर इम्पैक्ट होने हैं। इससे बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन रोज हुए कि भाई, पहला क्वेश्चन होता है कि पॉलिटिकली रशिया यूएस को आपने हैंडल कैसे किया, पॉलिटिकली उनको एक सेम पेज पे आप कैसे लाए। सेकंड, आप जो इकोनॉमिक मेगा कॉरिडोर बना रहे हो, जो कि इंडिया, यूएई, यूरोपियन कंट्रीज और यूएस के बीच में होगा, तो उसका इम्पैक्ट क्या आएगा। आपने बायोफ्यूल अलायंसेस की भी बात की है इसमें, तो बायोफ्यूल अलायंसेस हमारी एपेक्स से कैसे डिफरेंट है, उसके इम्पैक्ट क्या रहेंगे। बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन बिंग हम भारतवासी होने के साथ के लिए हमारे दिमाग में, मन में हमेशा बहुत तरह की बातें चल रही है कि ये कैसे हुआ, क्या होगा, हमारे इकोनॉमी पे क्या इम्पैक्ट आएगा, पॉलिटिकली क्या इम्पैक्ट आएगा। और कहीं ना कहीं एक बात की बड़ी खुशी है कि एक भारतीय होने के साथ साथ हमारा जो एक ओहदा होता है, कद होता है, कहीं ना कहीं काफी बढ़ गया। ये हम सब में बड़ी इंटरनल फीलिंग है, बड़ी दिल से खुशी होती है इस देख के। तो सबसे पहले भारतीय वित्त सलाहकार समिति की तरफ से सारे G28 करवाने वाले को, सरकार को, गवर्नमेंट को और आप सभी पार्टिसिपेंट को बहुत बहुत बधाइयाँ। और इस चीजों को ध्यान में रखते हुए हमारे भारतीय वित्त सलाहकार समिति में, जो कि एक फिनांस प्रोफेशनल्स का ग्रुप है, जहाँ पे चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट, ICWA, कंपनी सेक्रेटरीशिप, लॉयर, इकोनॉमिक्स, फिनांस प्रोफेशनल एक ग्रुप है, जो कि हम आए दिन भारत की इकोनॉमी, इंडियन इकोनॉमी के कैसे काम हो, कहाँ उसके हम और एडवांसमेंट की कैसे आगे बढ़ा सकते हैं, टैक्स लॉज में कैसे हैं, कमर्शियल लॉ की डिस्कशन करते रहते हैं। तो हमारे ग्रुप ने एक डिस्कशन किया और G20 के बारे में एक प्रोग्राम रखा। और सबसे पहले मैं बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहूँगा चंद्र वधवा जी को, जिन्होंने इस टॉपिक को कंसेप्चुअलाइज किया, कंसीव किया और बहुत ही बड़ा योगदान किया उन्होंने पूरा एक डिस्कशन तैयार करने में। थैंक यू सो मच वधवा जी। हमारे बीच आज के पैनलिस्ट, हमारे बीच हमारे सुभाष चंद्र अग्रवाल जी हैं। सुभाष चंद्र अग्रवाल जी चेयरमैन भारतीय वित्तीय सलाहकार समिति हैं, साथ ही साथ सीएमडी हैं एसएमसी ग्लोबल के। हमारे बीच अनिल शर्मा जी हैं। अनिल शर्मा जी एडवाइजर हैं भारतीय वित्तीय सलाहकार समिति के, साथ ही साथ नफरा के मेंबर हैं, इंडिपेंडेंट एक्स इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर यूको बैंक है। हमारे बीच आज के स्पीकर एम्बेसडर भास्वती मुखर्जी जी हैं, वेलकम मैम। हमारे बीच पुनीत अग्रवाल, हमारे बीच गोपाल कृष्ण अग्रवाल जी हैं, स्पोक्स पर्सन बीजेपी, इकोनॉमिक्स, सोशल एक्टिविस्ट। हमारे बीच पुनीत अग्रवाल जी हैं। पुनीत अग्रवाल जी करंट प्रेसिडेंट भारतीय वित्त सलाहकार समिति दिल्ली। वी हैव विद अस मिसेस पारुल गुलाटी जी। पारुल गुलाटी जी डिप्टी डायरेक्टर हैं डीई में, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस में, वेलकम मैम। वी हैव नवल बजाज जी, आर renowned risk professional. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट नवल जी बड़े वोकल हैं, कई सारे फोरम में एज ए स्पीकर भी रहते हैं। हमारे बेंगलोर चैप्टर के प्रेसिडेंट है नवल जी। वी हैव विद अस अनिल गुप्ता जी, हमारे मतलब आप मार्गदर्शक हमारे अनिल गुप्ता जी, साथ ही साथ इनके बहुत सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज हैं।
जी नमस्कार जी।
We have with us Avnish Mata ji as well. Avnish Mata ji, a senior chartered accountant, ex-independent director in IRCON.
नमस्कार।
अब ज्यादा टाइम वेस्ट ना करते हुए, I would like to invite our chairman Sri Subhash Agrawal ji to give a welcome address. Over to you, Subhash ji.
Yeah, good evening everyone. Yeah.
Good evening.
First of all, मैं भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति को बधाई देना चाहता हूं कि जो G20 हमारा सक्सेसफुल हुआ है, उसके प्रोग्राम को, उसके बारे में डिस्कस करना, तो इसलिए मैं इस प्रोग्राम पूरी भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति की टीम को। दूसरा, हमारे बीच में एम्बेसडर भास्वती मुखर्जी, सी इज रिटायर्ड इंडियन डिप्लोमेट, और तो आप हमारे बीच में हैं, हम आपका स्वागत करते हैं। वी आर वेरी फॉर्चुनेट टू हैव यू एज ए स्पीकर। हमारे बीच में श्री गोपाल अग्रवाल जी हैं, जो स्पोक पर्सन बीजेपी के हैं, हमारे दोस्त भी हैं और लर्नड भी हैं, इकोनॉमिक में भी काफी नॉलेज रखते हैं, और हमेशा जब भी हम उनको बुलाते हैं, ये हमेशा हमारे प्रोग्राम को जरूर अटेंड करते हैं, तो मैं इनका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूँ।
नमस्कार।
श्री अनिल गुप्ता जी हैं हमारे बीच में। आप भी अनिल गुप्ता जी आरएसएस के अंदर दिल्ली के जनरल सेक्रेटरी हैं और भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति के फाउंडर हैं, और बढ़ चढ़कर भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति के अंदर एज ए एडवाइजर के सक्सेस के पीछे इनका पूरा योगदान है, तो इनका भी मैं बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं। आज के प्रोग्राम के सूत्रधार चंद्र वधवा जी, आप एडवाइजरी बोर्ड भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति के मेंबर हैं और एसएमसी के अंदर भी इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर हैं, और आईसीडब्ल्यूए के फॉर्मर ये चेयरमैन रहे हैं, प्रेसिडेंट रहे हैं, तो इनका होना भी बहुत स्वागत कार्य है, तो इनका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। नवल बजाज नवल जी ने बड़े अच्छे प्रोग्राम करते हैं, भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति के जनरल सेक्रेटरी हैं, इनका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। आप बड़े एक्टिव हैं भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति को रन करने के लिए। मिस पारुल गुलाटी जी, डिप्टी डायरेक्टर डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक अफेयर, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस। वी आर वेरी फॉर्चुनेट टू हैव यू मैडम। सो आपका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। आपका हमारे बीच में होना हमारे प्रोग्राम को गौरवान्वित कर रहा है। हमारे बीच में श्री अवनीश माटा जी हैं, आप फॉर्मर प्रेसिडेंट भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति हैं और बड़े एक्टिव हैं। मैं इनका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं। अभी एम्बेसडर राहुल छाबड़ा जी ने ज्वाइन कर लिया है। सर आपका भी आप रिटायर्ड इंडियन डिप्लोमेट हैं, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है भारत वित्त सलाहकार समिति के अंदर। आपने बहुत शॉर्ट नोटिस में हमें टाइम दिया है, अपना कीमती टाइम। आप अभी टीवी पे भी मैं देख रहा था आपको, तो आपका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। पूरी एंटायर BVSS टीम और कोई एंटायर ऑडियंस, सभी का बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। जैसे मैंने बताया कि G20 का जो प्रोग्राम है ये हमारा बहुत सक्सेसफुल हुआ है। हमारे को इसकी प्रेसिडेंटशिप 1 दिसंबर 2022 को मिली थी और हमने अभी 8 सितंबर 9 सितंबर को हमने 10 सितंबर को हमने प्रोग्राम कंप्लीट किया है। तो और प्रोग्राम वर्ल्ड वाइड बहुत लाइक किया गया है, इससे भारत का बहुत कद बढ़ा है। इसमें सबसे खास बात जो रही है वो अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज, ग्लोबल साउथ जिसे हम बोलते हैं, उसको एक परमानेंट मेंबर, इसकी काउंसिल को, अफ्रीकन काउंसिल को परमानेंट मेंबर ले लिया है। अभी 20 मेंबर है तो 21 हो गए और ये हमारी लीडरशिप में हुआ है, तो इसका श्रेय मोदी जी को जाता है। और बेसिकली इससे सही मायने में अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज को भी बहुत बड़ा फायदा होगा, ग्लोबल ट्रेड, इन्वेस्टमेंट, इनको एक रीसेप होने को मिलेगा। तो ये अपने आप में बहुत बड़ा स्टेप है। तो दूसरी बात ये है जो हमने थीम रखा वसुधैव कुटुंबकम, इसका मतलब ये है कि
दूसरा जो लैपटॉप से मैंने ज्वाइन किया उसमें कैमरा नहीं चल रहा।
किसका, मेरे लिए कह रहे हैं?
दूसरा लैपटॉप है तो हाँ, तो मेन लैपटॉप पे नहीं चल रहा वो अभी तक, तो आई एम ट्राइंग सेलफोन पे चल जाए।
नहीं, राहुल जी की उधर से आवाज आ रही है सर।
अच्छा,
राहुल सर आप एक बार
मैं ट्राई करता हूँ मोबाइल के थ्रू, बट कोई मेन लैपटॉप पे फोन चल रहा, तो मैं मोबाइल के थ्रू ट्राई।
वसुधैव कुटुंबकम का जो थीम है, द वर्ल्ड इज वन फैमिली, इससे हमारा जो विजन है, सोच है, कोऑपरेशन है, कोऑर्डिनेशन है, सभी का हमें मिला। क्योंकि हम एक विजन दिया है पूरे एंटायर वर्ल्ड को, वी आर वन, हमें सबको मिलके कार्य करना चाहिए। तो ये एक अपने आप में ये जोड़ने का काम कर रहा है। ये थीम हमने बहुत अच्छा रखा है और इट हैज बीन अप्रिशिएटेड बाय ऑल वर्ल्ड लीडर्स। और दूसरी जो बड़ी खास बात है कि G20 की न्यू दिल्ली डिक्लेरेशन जो कंसेंसस के साथ बनी है, इतनी बड़ी डिक्लेरेशन और इतने विरोधाभास के बावजूद, जहाँ पे यूरोप हो, जहाँ अमेरिका हो, जहाँ रसिया हो, जहाँ चाइना हो, जहाँ इतने डिफरेंट कंट्रीज हैं, इतने डिफरेंट सोच हो, चाइना यूक्रेन का युद्ध हो, इसमें रसिया यूक्रेन का युद्ध के बीच के अंदर इतने विरोधाभास चीजें हो सकती थी, उसको हम एक प्लेटफॉर्म पे लाके एक डिक्लेरेशन करना, एक कंसेंसस बनाना अपने आप में बहुत बड़ी चीज है। तो ये हमारी बहुत बड़ी सफलता मानी जाएगी कि हमने इसको इस तरह से हैंडल किया कि हम एक कंसेंसस बना चुके और हम ये कर सके। एक जो मैं बड़ी बात कहूंगा, ग्लोबल बायोफ्यूल अलायंस, हमने एक इसको MOU बनाया और इसमें कई कंट्रीज इसके अंदर, हालांकि हमारा तो ग्लोबल बायोफ्यूल अलायंस में सिर्फ 3% मैन्युफैक्चरिंग है, 50% से ऊपर US की है और दूसरे कंट्रीज की हैं। लेकिन इन स्पाइट ऑफ दैट हमने इसको इनिशिएटिव लिया, क्योंकि ये ग्रीन एनर्जी के हिसाब से देखें तो ये बहुत बढ़िया अलायंस हो गया है और ये बढ़ावा मिलेगा वर्ल्ड वाइड। तो मैं इसके लिए मोदी जी को, इंडिया को बधाई देता हूं। और एक बहुत बड़ी बात हमने जो करी, इंडिया मिडल ईस्ट यूरोप इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर, तो ये हमने सही मायने में, चाहे वो रेलवे रूट के थ्रू हो, चाहे रोड के रूट के हो, सी रूट के हो, ये अपने आप में एक ट्रेड के लिए बहुत बड़ा इनिशिएटिव है जो इंडिया ने लिया है। और इसके लिए एमओयू भी साइन हो गए हैं गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया से, यूएस से, सऊदी अरेबिया से, यूरोप यूनियन से, यूएई से, फ्रांस से, जर्मनी से, इटली से है ये IMEC कॉरिडोर। तो ये अपने आप में बहुत बड़ी अचीवमेंट है, मैं इसको बहुत बधाई देता हूं। एक फाइनेंशियल G20 ग्लोबल पार्टनरशिप फॉर फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन डॉक्यूमेंट, इससे भी हमें सफलता मिली है, इसको भी हम कंसेंसस करा चुके हैं। क्योंकि जो इंक्लूसिव दैट मीन्स जो पुअर कंट्रीज है उनको हमें साथ लेके आगे बढ़ना है, ये कंसेप्ट हमने दिया। ये इससे हमारी लीडरशिप में कोई भी ये मतलब इस तरह की डेवलपमेंट होना अपने आप में एक ग्रेट मानता है। एक हमने कहा कि रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी को ट्रिपल किया जाए बाय 2030, ये भी एक्सेप्ट हो गया और ये भी मैं इसको भी ग्रेट अचीवमेंट मानता हूं। एक हमने क्रिप्टो करेंसी, क्रिप्टो एसेट्स, इसके बारे में एक रेगुलेशंस, इसको कैसे चलाना चाहिए इसके बारे में एक कंसेंसस बनाया है। इसके बारे में रेगुलेशंस फर्दर ड्राफ्ट होंगे, लेकिन ये भी एक बहुत जरूरी था, थ्रेट था बहुत बड़ा वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमी को, फाइनेंस इकोनॉमी को। तो इसके लिए भी हमने कोऑर्डिनेटेड करके इसको भी एक प्लेटफॉर्म पे लाए हैं। हेल्थ केयर, रेजिलेंस एंड रिसर्च, commitment to global food security and nutrition, India Mercosur Professional Trade Agreement, Finance Trade Agreement for cryptocurrencies, ये बहुत सारी चीजें। मेरा टाइम 3-4 मिनट का ही है, मैं इसको समअप कर रहा हूं, लेकिन मैं एक ही बात कहता हूं कि ये जो G20 का हमारा प्रोग्राम है, ये बहुत बड़े लेवल पे 125 कंट्री ने पार्टिसिपेट किया। हमने पूरे हिंदुस्तान में इस प्रोग्राम को फैलाया, एक बड़े डिफरेंट अप्रोच से हमने किया। मोदी जी की लीडरशिप में अमिताभ कांत शेरपा थे, पूरी हमारी मिनिस्ट्री लगी थी। 200 आवर्स तक इसको डिक्लेरेंस को बनाने में जो टाइम लगा, ये अपनी छोटी चीज नहीं है। ये हम अपने आप को एक वर्ल्ड लीडर, वर्ल्ड गुरु, इसको हम प्रूव कर रहे हैं। हमारा कद बहुत बड़ा है। और मैं अपनी बात को यहीं खत्म करता हूं। वंस अगेन आई वुड लाइक टू कॉन्ग्रेचुलेट भारत विद सलाहकार समिति टू होल्ड दिस प्रोग्राम। इट्स ए वंडरफुल प्रोग्राम, वंडरफुल कंसेप्ट एंड टाइमली कंसेप्ट। So once again, I would like to thanks all our invitees, speakers, and all our guests who are connected to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Subhash ji. Thanks a lot. Now I would like to request Gopal Krishna Agarwal ji to give his opening remarks. Over to you, Gopal ji.
नमस्कार। हमारे भारतीय वित्त सलाहकार समिति के चेयरमैन सुभाष जी, चंद्र वधवा जी जिन्होंने कार्यक्रम को स्वरूप दिया, पुनीत जी भारतीय वित्त सलाहकार समिति, मैडम, सभी का बहुत बहुत अभिनंदन करके अपनी बात को संक्षिप्त रूप में आपके सामने रख देता हूं। देखिए, सुभाष जी ने कई बातें कही है, मैं 2 बातें उसमें ऐड करना चाहता हूं कि ग्लोबल लेवल पे इंडिया की जो लीडरशिप स्टैब्लिश हुई है G20 से, ये अपने आप में एग्जाम्पलरी है। और केवल G20 नहीं, इसके साथ हमने देखना चाहिए कि चाहे वो मल्टीलेटरल प्लेटफॉर्म्स हो, चाहे ब्रिक्स हो, या जो क्वाड हो, या उनके बाद आसियान कंट्रीज का जो प्लेटफॉर्म्स है, इन सब में भारत की बात को भी सुना जाता है, उसको रिस्पेक्ट के साथ देखा जाता है। और वह अपने आप में बहुत कोई छोटा मोटा अचीवमेंट नहीं है। G20 के 2 पहलू इसके लिए बहुत बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन करेंगे। वह जो थीम है, वन फैमिली, वन नेशन, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर, उसमें वसुधैव कुटुंबकम की जो भावना है उसको मूर्त रूप देने का काम G20 में किया है। वह है जो डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ने, एक बात बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है जिसको आज पूरा विश्व मान रहा है और हमें इसको देखना चाहिए। वह है कि जिस तरह से जन कल्याणकारी योजनाओं को जनता तक पहुंचाने में पिछले 8-9 साल से काम किया है। वह जो टेक्नोलॉजी का यूज है, चाहे डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर हो, चाहे वैक्सीन की डिलीवरी हो, या जो और ऐप के माध्यम से सोशल वेलफेयर स्कीम्स को जो प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में सफलता से पिछले 8-9 साल से इम्प्लीमेंट किया है, उसको इस दिल्ली डिक्लेरेशन के माध्यम से डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के रूप में पूरे विश्व को देने का काम मोदी जी ने इस बात से किया है। यह अपने आप में एक एग्जाम्पलरी है, और इसको यह भी वर्ल्ड बैंक ने इसके लिए कहा है कि यह जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, इसने 47 साल के जो एफर्ट लगते थे जिस काम को, सोशल वेलफेयर को जनता तक पहुंचाने को, उसको स्क्वीज करके 6 साल में उसको अचीव किया है। और इस डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को वर्ल्ड लेवल पे टेक्नोलॉजी को शेयर करने का जो बात इसमें दिल्ली डिक्लेरेशन के माध्यम से की गई है, वह वसुधैव कुटुंबकम की बात को, वॉक द टॉक वाली बात है, उसको सामने लेके आते हैं। वैक्सीन मैत्री के माध्यम से भी मोदी जी ने यह कहा था कि ग्लोबल लेवल पे हम समाज के, देश के, विश्व के हर देश को सपोर्ट करेंगे, और यह अब डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के माध्यम से यह दूसरा महत्वपूर्ण अचीवमेंट है। और इसमें केवल यही नहीं है, नॉलेज इकोनॉमी का जो प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी का अर्थव्यवस्था को तेज गति से आगे बढ़ाने का उद्देश्य है, चाहे वो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस का रूप में हो, फिनटेक के माध्यम से हो, चाहे उसको 5G 6G के इनिशिएटिव के रूप में हो, स्टार्टअप के रूप में हो, ब्लॉकचेन, या इसकी एक्टिविटीज को और उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करने के ऐप माध्यम को भी खोलता है, और साथ में हमारे इस इनिशिएटिव को आगे वर्ल्ड तक ले जाता है कि ग्लोबल लीडरशिप स्टैब्लिश करता है। दूसरी बात मैं अंडरलाइन करना चाहता हूं, क्योंकि ज्यादा लंबा नहीं बोलना है, बहुत लोग बोलेंगे, वह है सोशियो कल्चरल ओरिएंटेशन ऑफ पीएम नरेंद्र मोदी, जो इस G20 इनिशिएटिव में बहुत अच्छी तरह से सामने निकल के आया है। वह यह है कि प्रधानमंत्री जी ने जो सब जगह पे 60 से ऊपर सेंटर्स में यह जो कार्यक्रम किया है G20 का, और 1 लाख से ऊपर इन्फ्लुएंसर लोग जो आएंगे, और उनको अपने आप में एक्सपोज किया इंडिया का जो ट्रू पोटेंशियल है कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी का, आर्ट, कल्चर, म्यूजिक, फेस्टिवल, फूड, आर्किटेक्चर, टूरिज्म। यह जो उनके सामने ये जो दर्शाया है, या जो सामने रखा है, इससे भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था में एक कल्चरल इकोनॉमी का एक रिवॉल्यूशन तो आएगा ही। विश्व में भारत की पहचान, जो कभी ऐसा होता था कि स्नेक चार्मर्स की बात है या कुछ पुअर कंट्री की बात है, उसको पूरी तरह से चेंज कर दिया है। तो 2 चीजें बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मैं यहाँ पे अंडरलाइन करना चाहता हूँ, सुभाष जी ने जो कहा उसके अलावा, एक तो कल्चर, सोशियो कल्चरल इकोनॉमिक कॉन्सेप्ट which Prime Minister Modi has been implementing, whether it is the Ayodhya corridor or whether it is the organization of Kumbh Mela, or whether it is different kind of temple economies, etc. उसको ग्लोबल लेवल पे प्रधानमंत्री जी ने एक मॉडल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के रूप में स्टैब्लिश किया है, और जन कल्याणकारी माध्यम को, IPR या इस तरह की बातों को जो पब्लिक गुड की तरह, पहली बार पूरे वर्ल्ड में मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री में ये जो डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को पब्लिक गुड की तरह प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी ने पेश किया है। इसने भारत की छवि को बहुत मजबूत तरीके से आगे बढ़ाया। और जो इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर की बात है, उसमें मैं एक चीज ये ऐड करना चाहता हूं कि यह जो विजन है नेशनल सिक्योरिटी का प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी का, कि यह जो विजन है हम लोगों को आगे ले जाने का, उसमें नेशनल सिक्योरिटी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण तरीके से ट्रेड रूट को उन्होंने अपने विजन के साथ आगे बढ़ाया है। यह तो एक इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर था। इसके पहले चाहे वो इजराइल में जाके हाइफा पोर्ट के बारे में चर्चा हो, चाहे स्विस कैनाल्स के थ्रू ट्रेड रूट्स को सिक्योर करने की बात हो, और या फिर ग्रीस में जाके एथेंस के पास के ट्रेड रूट्स के थ्रू पोर्ट को के ऊपर नेगोशिएशन करने का है। तो नेशनल सिक्योरिटी को भी महत्वपूर्ण उन्होंने इसमें विजन के साथ आगे बढ़ाया है। और जो फिटिंग रिप्लाई है चाइना का, जो बेल्ट रोड इनिशिएटिव था, बेल्ट रोड एंड BRI जो है इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो वो बनाते थे, जिससे डेट ट्रैप में कई कंट्रीज फंस गई थी, चाहे श्रीलंका हो, पाकिस्तान हो, या जो बांग्लादेश हो, उस तरह की कंट्रीज के का एक ऑल्टरनेटिव मैकेनिज्म प्रधानमंत्री जी ने इस इंडिया मिडिल ईस्ट यूरोप कॉरिडोर के थ्रू किया है। हमारे ट्रेड रूट्स को सिक्योर करेगा, ग्लोबल एंड रीजनल सप्लाई चेन को इंटीग्रेट करेगा, हमारे MSME, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, ऑटोमोबाइल, स्पेस टेक्नोलॉजी, डिफेंस, इन सब सेक्टर्स को ग्लोबल लेवल पे इंटीग्रेट करने के लिए भी यह काम करेगा। तो ये 2-3 बातें जो मैं रखना चाहता हूँ। भारतीय वित्त सलाहकार समिति का ये बहुत अच्छा इनिशिएटिव है, इस पे जितनी चर्चा हो, और यह जो अमृत काल वाला प्रधानमंत्री जी का यह जो इनिशिएटिव है कि स्थान पे देगा, तो उनका जो विजन है कि आर्थिक महाशक्ति बन के ही भारत इस ग्लोबल लीडरशिप को अचीव कर सकता है। तो आर्थिक रूप से सशक्त भारत की भी इसमें पूरी परिकल्पना है। ग्लोबल लेवल पे अपनी लीडरशिप के लिए जो एस्पेक्ट्स हैं उन सबको भी लेके चलें, और भारतीय जो पुरानी एंशिएंट हमारी जो कॉन्सेप्ट है वसुधैव कुटुंबकम, उसको भी ग्राउंड लेवल पे इम्प्लीमेंट किया। तो यह बहुत बड़ा अचीवमेंट है, और मुझे लगता है कि यह भारत के भविष्य के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण अचीवमेंट है। थैंक यू संदीप जी।
थैंक यू सो मच गोपाल जी, थैंक्स अ लॉट। आपने बिजी शेड्यूल से आपने टाइम निकाला हमारे लिए, थैंक्स अ लॉट। नाउ फ्रेंड्स, straight away we'll move to session 1, that is political impact of G20 success to India, and I would like to call our moderator for this session, Naval Bajaj ji. Now nice is your Naval Bajaj ji, over to you.
Thank you Sandeep ji, and good afternoon to everyone. Honorable Subhash ji ने, चेयरमैन BVSS, एंड गोपाल जी राष्ट्रीय प्रवक्ता भाजपा, उन्होंने काफी बातें रख दी हैं, तो मेरा काम काफी आसान हो गया है। सो दोनों को मैं धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूँ। मैं सोच रहा था कि G20 के ऊपर मैं क्या मटेरियल बोलूंगा, बट मुझे जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ेगी। नाउ आई विल स्ट्रेट अवे कम टू द पॉइंट। सो but before we set on to this journey of learning, as I always do, I would like to remember Lord Ganesh and Ma Saraswati to bless all of us here, so that this discussion brings out some good learnings to all of us. I'll be mostly talking in English because most of the audience connected to me being in Bangalore may not be comfortable in Hindi. So just respecting their limitations, I'll be speaking mostly in English. Friends, BVSS is a think tank. And when we say that we are a think tank, then we have to start thinking, challenging from all angles. So Sandeep ji, when you proposed that I should be moderating this session, the session name itself is, as you rightly mentioned, that political impact of G20 success to India. That means somewhere BVSS has already declared it to be a success, as rightfully so, I am sure. But then in the curious mind of our members, there could still be a question, why it is a success, whether it is a success. And the curious mind asks why it has been declared a success. Was it beyond optics? What are the fundamental changes going to happen? And itna mahal kyun bana hua hai, in Hindi, right? So friends, who better than Bhaswati ji to address these questions? But before I go to her, I'll just introduce her formally. Bhaswati Mukherjee ji is a retired Indian diplomat. She is an active commentator on international affairs. Madam has joined IFS in 1976. She headed the IFS department specializing in European Union affairs from 1998 to 2004. She piloted institutional initiatives during that stint, such as annual Indo-European Union summits. She regularly writes and speaks about developments in the European Union. In 2018, she has published India and European Union, an Insider's View. And she was an ambassador of India to the Netherlands from 2010 to 2013 and was the permanent delegate of India to UNESCO also. I can keep on going on and on and on, friends. This is not going to end. But ma'am, I have this, starting question or starting note. United States has called its our G20 event as an absolute success. And I also agree that through skillful diplomacy and, by convincing Moscow, mobilizing Global South in its favor, Delhi did its leave. Delhi has definitely left its mark. That is for sure. Beijing has also shed its resistance. Specific geopolitical actions have been taken, which are not directly related to China, but will impact Delhi-Beijing bilateral axis to some extent. So, with that initial note, I would like to go to you with my submission that from your point of view, from a political or diplomacy point of view, why is it a success? And then secondly, being an expert on foreign policy, how come both USA, Europe, and Russia agreed to G20 New Delhi Declaration? What is that insight? I think our audience would love to, have that from your side, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Bajaj-ji, and it's a great honor to be here.
Thank you.
In fact, I will begin with the motto of the G20, which our Prime Minister initiated and which was resisted by China for a while, which was Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. But a lot of people, even in India, don't know that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in the Maha Upanishad is preceded by a very important phrase, because it says, Udhara Charita Nama Tu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It is only for the generous hearted that the world is one family. Yani ki, those who oppose Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam are not generous hearted. India is generous hearted. India believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and that is how Prime Minister Modi worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the aspiration of the African Union to become a permanent member of the G20, therefore making it G20+1. That was one of the finest moments for India in its quest to find Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. A lot has been spoken already about the G20 being a success, and a very valid point has been made by Bajaj-ji that people may ask, why are we beating our breast? Why are we saying it's a success? What's the reason for it? So I would like to first begin by saying that our Sherpa, Amitabh Kant, whom I know very well, he wrote in today's Times of India the following phrases, which resonate in my mind. He said, Prime Minister Modi envisages India as an impassioned interlocutor between the developed world and the global south. And India has delivered on this pledge. That's the first achievement of the G20. Then he added, the rich democratic ideals and cultural elements of India infused life into the presidency across 220 meetings held in 60 cities, covering every state and union territory. With over 1 lakh delegates and participants across these meetings, this truly became a presidency representative of diversity. I think that's a very important point which Amitabh made. And why? I have been on television when we did our meeting, for instance, in Srinagar. For the first time, through the length and breadth of this vast and diverse motherland of ours, every Indian came to understand the importance of the G20, why it matters, how Prime Minister Modi has taken India to these heights. And in every city, including, don't forget, the last 5 tense days 5 sleepless nights, is what Amitabh said. Spent in Nu, which recently was in news for the wrong reason and now is in the news for the right reason. Because it was in Nu that delicate balance was worked out, which I'll come to in a minute, with regard to one of the most difficult geopolitical problems of the time. And why was it India's success? Why? Ask yourself that the Security Council of today does not have India as a permanent member.
Yes.
The Security Council represents countries that were victorious in World War II, including our ex-colonizers. It does not have India. It does not have Brazil. It does not have a single African country. It does not have a single Latin American country. It does not have a single Arab country. But the G20 today has fashioned itself under India's presidency to be a truly representative body now that we have been able to get the African Union to be a permanent member. And having worked with Africans as a diplomat, I can tell you, Africans never forget a debt. They regard India as part of Africa. They regard India as their voice. And when the president of Comoros embraced our prime minister, when he was asked to come to the podium, he said, I almost wept with joy that such a moment has finally come to Africa. And that was truly, truly a moving moment for all of us here in India to see that we were able to bring our African brothers and sisters into the G20. Let me come to the next huge success. When our External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who by the way is a very close friend of mine, he joined Foreign Service 1 year after me. He wrote in his book, The India Way, the following. This is a time for India to engage America, to manage China, to cultivate Europe, to reassure Russia, to bring Japan into play, to draw our neighbors in, to expand the neighborhood, and to expand traditional constituencies of support. Think of all those TV images we saw. Think of Rishi Sunak and his wife going to the Akshardham temple with him holding an umbrella over his wife's head.
Yeah.
Think of Rishi Sunak kneeling next to Sheikh Hasina and talking to her. There could be nothing more symbolic than a man of Indian origin, Prime Minister of the country that colonized us for 180 years,
Yes.
coming to India and saying he's a practicing Hindu and proud to be a Hindu. Then you have to ask yourself the question that if Rishi Sunak can come to India, where Hinduism is a minority religion, and say that he is proud to be a practicing Hindu, then what is the problem in India if a Hindu says that I'm proud to be a practicing Hindu? So these are lessons which all Indians need to draw, that nobody should be ashamed of practicing their own religion if Rishi Sunak can come and say that here in India. There were other images too, which were iconic and which all the G20 leaders coming in front of the vast wheel of Konark and our Prime Minister explaining to Joe Biden what that wheel means, what is the strength of India, which brings me to the next issue, which is that our Prime Minister seamlessly used India's soft power and culture to bind the G20 members together in a magic tapestry that showed us to be a true emerging power. Now, let me come to the next issue, which you asked me to answer, Bajajji, which is how come USA, Europe, and Russia agreed to the New Delhi Declaration.
Yes.
For that also, in today's Times of India, Amitabh rightly said, when we started the presidency, Amitabh said, Prime Minister Modi said that India's presidency should be inclusive, decisive, and action-oriented. The declaration has 83 paragraphs and all have 100% consensus. How can anybody then say that it was not India's finest moment, that it was not Indian diplomacy's most fine moment, that we were able to have complete consensus on all these paragraphs, the most difficult of them, which was the Ukraine issue. You could ask me as a professional diplomat, how did we weave this magic together? It was very, very simple. We took from each country that had a huge problem a phrase that they were attached to, and we got the others to agree. Then we took from them another phrase that they were attached to and got the others to agree. So let me explain. It's very much like the manner in which Indians do yoga. Actually, it's a part of our soft power. We are trained for it in India. What did we do? If you look at the section on geopolitics, Bajajji, you will find it has 8 paragraphs. Whereas in the Bali Declaration, there were only 2 paragraphs on Ukraine. The 8 paragraphs are also titled according to Vasudeva Kutumbakam because it says, for the planet, peace and prosperity. Who can argue with that? It's like mother's milk. You can't argue with it. The heading. Then it says, it recognizes the immense human suffering and the adverse impact of wars and conflicts around the world. Nobody can object to that. When it mentions Ukraine, it only recalls the Bali Declaration in the context of Ukraine. And it refers to the UN resolutions on this issue, but it does not number them, unlike Bali. All the UN resolutions have condemned Russia for invading Ukraine. But we did not name the numbers, we just mentioned the resolutions. Then we said, and this is very important, that all states must abide by the UN Charter. Now, a permanent member of the Security Council, that is the Russian Federation and the Chinese, they cannot object if India puts draft language which says that all states must respect UN Charter. Because if you don't respect UN Charter, you cannot be a member of the United Nations. And it goes on to say, and this is very important, all states must refrain from the threat or use of force to seek territorial acquisition against the territorial integrity and sovereignty or political independence of any state. This is very important also for India, because if you look at it from a bilateral context, it applies equally to Chinese aggression on India. It applies equally to the effort of Pakistan to continue to sit on POK in defiance of the fact that POK belongs rightfully to India. And it is against trade from the Charter, so nobody can object to it. Then we balance the next line by saying that we cannot accept the use or threat of nuclear weapons. That brought the West into agreement because there have been threats by the Russians to use nuclear weapons, what they call dirty weapon. Dirty weapon means a small nuclear weapon, which causes less damage, but it's a nuclear weapon all the same. And finally, it says the G20 is a forum to discuss international economic cooperation, but it does recognize that geopolitical and security issues can have significant consequences for the global economy. Nobody can object to that. We then went on, and this was the most tricky thing, we went on to bring in the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and we accommodated Russia by talking about the Russian demands of using Russian fertilizers, etc. And we also accommodated the Ukrainian perspective by talking about the need to protect Ukrainian grain supplies, which are to be exported through the Black Sea. So in other words, what we did was to weave a narrative which catered to every constituent. But more than that, if you ask me frankly, why did the West and the Russians agree to the Indian text? There is another reason which has not been articulated publicly because it's very sensitive, which is the West believes that the BRICS expansion is going to result in an anti-Western alliance opposed to Western national security interests. The West, under President Biden particularly, did not want India to be humiliated by having a declaration without approval. The West, under President Biden, wanted to demonstrate that India is a most important global partner of the United States, that India is a force for stability and peace in the region, and that the United States will not allow India to be humiliated in the G20, because if India is humiliated in the G20, the future of the G20 as a potent force for peace and security gets eroded. Why did the Russians sign on? The Russians are an old friend of ours, tried and tested. When we were liberating Bangladesh, it was the Russians who said "Niet," no, 11 times in the Permanent Council to veto Kissinger's attempt to censure us. That is how history was made, and we liberated Bangladesh. Today, the Russians are painfully aware that they have become weakened and a junior partner of China. But they did not want the old friendship to be affected beyond repair by a "Niet," a Russian no to the declaration. Lavrov is an old friend of India, and he's a very close friend of External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar, who incidentally speaks fluent Russian. It was his first posting. He went along with the text after having explained to us what he cannot accept. Now we come to the biggest mystery of all. The absence of Xi Jinping, his deputy, and whether, I have been often asked on television, was it good for India or bad for India? My answer to them is, it was bad for China. It has nothing to do with India. We invited Xi Jinping. He chose not to come. When he chose not to come, he gave the impression of two things. A, that China does not like India's rise, that Chinese economy is not doing well, it doesn't want to be embarrassed, that initiative is going to come up, which will challenge directly the BRI, which is the two highways, the East and West Highway, which is to connect India with Middle East and Middle East with Europe. That is a direct challenge to the BRI. And finally, and this is a very important diplomatic spin, that perhaps Xi Jinping understood that if the geopolitics of the moment, if the Russians agree not to embarrass India, it is easier for him to blame his deputy for agreeing to the text. It would have been more difficult for him to be in Delhi and to say yes to the text. So by staying away from Delhi, he actually did us a favor and he did himself a favor. Now, this is not something I've said on television. I'm going to write about it. This is the first time I'm explaining it. But this is typical Chinese spin. When they are pushed into a corner, they always find a way out. And one way out is, and that is true actually both in India and in Japan and in China. We are Asians. We don't like losing face in public. In order not to lose face, he decided not to come. So I think that the points that I have made, and I will clarify it later, will come to the definitive conclusion for all of us in India as to the following: that Prime Minister Modi made it into a people's presidency. The presidency was of the people of India and the people of Bharat, because I strongly believe that the name of my country, whether Bharat or India, cannot be equated with any political alliance. India is too big for any political alliance. Whether we say Bharat or we say India, we are Bande Mataram, we know what we are talking about. We represent the great country and civilization that is Bharat, that is India. And Prime Minister Modi ensured that the declaration would ensure that nobody now can question the inexorable rise of China. Whether they get us into the Security Council now or later, we are already in, because we did what the Security Council could not do. The Security Council was not able to find any compromise language on Ukraine, which Prime Minister Modi and India did in 5 days in noon. And in the first minute of the second session, I was covering it for WION on television. When he made that declaration and he thumped the table, there was one moment's thunderous silence before everyone applauded, saying, What has Prime Minister Modi and India achieved? It's a miracle. I would like to conclude, just like you began with Bande Mataram, which I, as the ambassador of India in Netherlands, under Prime Minister, under Congress Party's rule, I always began every National Day celebration first with Bande Mataram and then with Janagana Mana. People told me that was dangerous. It was not dangerous. Bande Mataram can never be dangerous for anyone. I would like to conclude by quoting from the Rig Veda, which is my favorite again. And it says, Rig Veda, chapter 11, may the stream of my life flow into the river of righteousness. Loose the bonds of sin that bind me. Let not the thread of my song be cut while I sing. And let not my work end before its fulfillment. And truly, India has fulfilled, and Prime Minister Modi has fulfilled what is written in the Rig Veda. Our thread of our song was not cut. We adopted the Delhi Declaration. Our work did not end without its fulfillment. And Prime Minister Modi has said we should have a virtual summit in November to ensure that what we adopted, which was of primeval importance, which my colleague Rahul Chhabra, and we're so lucky to have him here, he's an expert on the financial track of the G20, will speak to us about. We will ensure that what we achieved in Delhi is not just written on paper. We will implement it, because that is what our Prime Minister meant when he told Amitabh Kant that we have to be action-oriented and decisive. That's what we've become under him, and that's how we will continue to be. Thank you very much, and Vande Mataram and Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So the key message that I got out of your answers, beyond the conclusion that you have given, that number one, Bharat's time has come, and that is why people are not able to ignore it. Our position itself is such that we can really play a key role in the international diplomacy. And second is that beyond the linguistic creativity, beyond the balancing act, I think it was also about the intentions, the straightforwardness, the straightforward positioning, and very clear positioning, any unapologetic positioning about India's stand, Bharat's stand for last couple of years, last 3 years. So people know, the countries know exactly what is our position about Russia, what is our position about our other neighbors, and whether they have a conflict interest or not. We are not going to budge. So I think your entire deliberation was very insightful, especially the key things that you have shared with participants here, which are not out there in the media. It was very interesting for me also. There's one more leading question about your, deliberation in terms of what is the impact of this success? How do you see Bharat going beyond, today? How it will change our trajectory from the point of view of political impact? What is your view on that?
It is already completely transformed. The political trajectory is transformed because we speak in a different language. If you saw the final picture of our Sherpa with the Brazilian Sherpa holding his hand, he actually was demonstrating that just as India helped to bring about consensus in Bali, the 2 paragraphs in Bali, it was India who ensured the success of the Bali Declaration. And clearly the Brazilians know that in going forward, they will need India's help for success when the G20 gavel is finally handed over on 1st of December this year. We are still G20 president till 1st of December this year. If you talk about the other successes, you should read, and I will send to you privately, what the editorial in the Dawn in Pakistan said today about India's G20 success. It's quite interesting. It's a very sensible commentator, Pakistani commentator, said that while India goes from success to success, while the Chandrayaan has landed on the moon and there is a sun mission, and everybody is applauding India's G20, what are we doing in Pakistan except chasing Imran Khan and postponing elections in Pakistan? Is this what Pakistan has been reduced to compared to India? Which brings me to my next point, which is that 20 years ago, Bajaj
yes,
when the Europeans would talk of India, they would do what we call in the Foreign Service hyphenate India with Pakistan. In other words, if somebody from the West would come to Islamabad, he would come to Delhi. If he came to Delhi, he would go to Islamabad. Now, was there any discussion at all in these 3 days of the G20 summit about Pakistan? It has become completely irrelevant. But if you look at the G20 declaration, there is so much good stuff on terrorism. There is so much good stuff on all the things which matter to us. But most important is that highway, the highway which will connect India to the Middle East to Europe. And we are famous for bringing technology which is affordable and cheap. Whereas the BRI, everybody recognizes, including the Africans, that they have got into a debt trap. And we've got Africa into the G20, which means what? Which means we have the whole of Africa's market, resources, goodwill to count upon as we expand our economy from number 5 position to number 3 position. So yes, my long answer to your short question is, the success demonstrates that we have truly arrived. And I would like to say that one of the things that pained me the most was that when all the top leadership of Brussels was in Delhi, we had a representative of a political party who believes in I.D.I.aid talking about foreign policy to an audience which was not listening to him, because their eyes were glued on the television screens in India, where the Brussels leadership was here applauding our Prime Minister and India. What a wrong moment for that representative of I.N.D.I.A. I never call it India. The dot. What was he doing in Brussels? So that again shows the complete relevance of our Prime Minister and his message to the world and to India.
Ma'am, I just love the deliberation and responses from you, and I can keep on going on, and definitely we have much more questions offline also for you. But considering the time that has been given to me by my colleague Sandeep, I would like to just ask Sandeep, can I have the liberty of asking the panelists here if they have any question for ma'am before we go to the next session? Sandeep?
I have to leave at 18:55 for a TV session at 7 o'clock. So,
Sure. Anil sir, do you want to make any comment?
I just want to make one comment. That's all. Ma'am, we have heard of X-ray view, but you have given MRI view. I must say, I could never imagine that within 3 sentences you explained whole of the G20 declaration with respect to Ukraine, their grain issue, then with respect to Russia with their fertilizer issue, then with respect to China, why the Z didn't come. Salute to your knowledge. I attended the seminar organized by Chandra Vadvaji, where Amitabh Kant came and you were also there. And I can understand the deliberation that was taking place between you and Amitabh Kant. But at that time, I couldn't appreciate much because I was not having very good knowledge of the diplomacy as you people have. So we are really thankful. You have spared so much time. I was told by Chandra Vadvaji that you were little not that well today, but still you spare time. So thankful to you, and we will call you again also.
Thank you very much. In fact, in his interactions with me, and now Vadvaji has qualified to be a part of the Foreign Service, I think.
we call Vadvaji deemed IFS.
वो foreign policy पे expert हो गए Vadvaji.
Ma'am, let it be in this group, not in your. I'm not sitting in your group.
अगर कोई और question हो तो मैं जवाब दे सकती हूँ.
Okay, Sandeep ji, please, you go ahead.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot. A very wonderful deliberation, very resourceful and insightful. Thank you so much, Naval ji. Thanks a lot. Now we'll move to next session. Our next session is about economics and G20. A speaker will be Ambassador Rahul Chhabra ji and will be moderated by Parul ji. So now, Parul ji, the dice is yours. Over to you, Parul ji, please.
And thank you, madam, because like you really brought to the light the political aspect of the G20 And this session will be on the other aspect of the G20, which is the economic and financial issues. And just to enlighten everyone, like as you would know, G20, when it started in 1999, the starting was actually done by the economic and financial issues. So we've had these issues for long, and we've seen how previous presidencies have worked upon. But as many of you have already pointed out, Indian G20 presidency was a huge success. It was a success on both Sherpa as well as financial issues. And for that, today we have a very renowned expert, I would say, on this particular topic, among the others, Ambassador Rahul Chabra. Hello, sir. Welcome to this session. Before we, formally start the event, I would like to say a few words about sir. And pardon me, sir, if I say something which may not be, how you view it, but then how I saw your profile, and I was really honored to, welcome you. You've been an High Commissioner to Kenya, Ambassador to Somalia, and permanent representative to the United Nations Environment Program. So also has a distinguished track record across global and local settings, including leadership roles, spanning policy making, execution, and corporate engagement. He's also held the post of Secretary Economic Relations in the Ministry of External Affairs, where among several other tasks, he spearheaded India's US $40 billion development partnership program and guided Exim Bank policies as a board member. He has also received and organized the first two editions of the India Central Europe Business Forum, which has become a regular feature in the Indian business calendar. So thank you for joining today's event. So when we talk about the Indian G20 presidency, discussion cannot be concluded if we don't talk about the economic and financial issues. And I think everyone here during this session will agree that India as the presidency pushed for issues that were of relevance to Global South. And everyone as part of the G20 team worked hard to deliver on them. So my question to you first is, when we talk about the global challenges of today, of the 21st century, the first topic, the first issue that comes to our mind is how to manage the global debt vulnerability. This is an issue which has been there on the G20 agenda for a long period of time. So during our presidency, sir, how do you think we've made significant progress in delivering relief to debt-stressed countries? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Parul, for those warm words of introduction. Can you hear me? Is it clear? Okay, good. So as you rightly said, I mean, it started off in 1999, sort of the first meeting following the Asian financial crisis. So that's the origin of the G20. It was at the finance minister, central bank level. And then in 2008, with the Lehman Brothers collapse, that's when the first summit at the heads of state level. And then 2009 in Pittsburgh was the second summit. I had the privilege of attending both the G20, the first G20 and the second G20. So I have been part of that. And so now seeing it happen in India really gave me a good sense of, from where we started and where we have reached now. But just to put it in context, I mean, so you've given me a few minutes to sort of summarize what has taken over a year of deliberations. So I thought we'll just sort of, I'll talk about the issues so that we don't miss out on anything. We'll try and list out most of it. And then maybe in the Q&A, you want to, like you mentioned about debt vulnerabilities, we can talk about the other issues in more detail, depending on the audience interest and your interest. Basically, the background of COVID was there, and then of course Ambassador Bashwati Mukherjee mentioned about the Russia-Ukraine, how we managed a sort of compromise on that. But just to keep in mind that is the background in which the G20 was being held. COVID is still sort of just finishing, Russia-Ukraine war. So the two black swan events, followed by the US-China tech war. So in that context, now we come in with Indian economic diplomacy, trying to sort out So let's quickly run over what are the issues that happened and how were they resolved. So the first one that's the most important to us, of course, in that sense, is the medium and small enterprises. There was a Jaipur call of action. So this was a meeting held there in Jaipur, so the city, so that's how they called it, for MSMEs. So they talked about mapping global value chains. They talked about digitalization of trade documents. So these are all issues that MSMEs face. Bigger companies are able to deal with it quite easily. So they reached a sort of via media of how we move forward on that. WTO, how their aid for trade program, how should that be taken forward? How do you address skill gaps? What do you do to promote decent work? There's already a UN global accelerator for jobs. So we support that program, the G20. The databases to be set up, global skill gaps to be actually mapped so that, India is going to be one of the largest providers of manpower in the coming decades. So skilled manpower and because of our youthful population. Then there was talk about financial inclusion, the digital public infrastructure. I'll come to that later. Fighting corruption, zero tolerance for corruption. There's already a three G20 high-level principles, as they call it: law enforcement and info sharing, asset recovery, how is it to take place, effectiveness of public bodies. So they're fighting corruption. What do you do? Then we talk about SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Today we are at the midpoint of 2030 is the target, and we have only achieved 12%. So you can know how short we are on that. So what are we going to do about it? Then even there was a Goa roadmap for tourism and cultural, how that is going to fit into the SDGs. So that was a meeting held in Goa. So that's how that came in. But otherwise, they recall the Addis Ababa action agenda. So many of them were already items which have been discussed and maybe not taken forward enough, not reached fruition, not completed. So they need to be recalled so that the world doesn't forget that they had agreed to that. I'll come to that because that's very important in terms of climate finance. So in that sense, there was the SDGs. Then there was eliminating hunger and malnutrition. Again, there were the Deccan high-level principles because this was a meeting held in that part of India. Then there was health and education. There's a Green Development Pact where the Paris commitment of sort of trying to restrict it to 1.5 degrees, not even 2 degrees centigrade. I mean, we are seeing what's happening. Every event is getting more and more severe, every weather-related event. So even pushing it up to 2 degrees may not really be such a good idea, whereas we had agreed to 1.5 as long back as Paris, which is over a decade back. How do we achieve that? Prime Minister Modi had mentioned the lifestyle for environment. Simple changes to your lifestyle, how they can contribute to that. Then we'll come to the funding for the renewable energy. Then there was restoring ecosystems. How do you conserve, protect the existing ecosystems? Sort of reverse the biodiversity loss by 2030. We are really losing biodiversity at such a fast pace. So there was, what are you going to do? So there already, like I mentioned, many of these things don't really require some sort of new solution or new answers. This has already been discussed in the Kunming-Montreal Global Diversity Framework. So that already exists. It's just that people seem to have, it's slipped off the radar. COVID came, other issues came, and so you need to recall these, put them back on the burner. Instead of the back burner, they come back in front, and that you've got to deal with these issues and not just push them aside. Therefore, then we come to the Gandhinagar implementation roadmap. That was there because, again, there's a commitment. G20 has already said that the land degradation should be reduced by 50% by 2040. So how are we going to do it? So that was there in an implementation roadmap for the Gandhinagar implementation roadmap. Then there was about the ocean-based economy. How do you reduce plastic pollution? That was again talked about. Financing cities of tomorrow. I mean, India is going to urbanize at the fastest rate. What China did in the last 30 years, we're going to do in the next 15 years, maybe. So how are these cities of tomorrow going to be financed, set up? What are the systems in place? Reducing disaster risk. So actually a working group was set up to reduce disaster risk, build resilient infrastructure, reinvigorating multilateralism. Then you come, in that we'll again come to the multilateral development banks and all that, funding for them, we can talk about it later, where reforming international financial institutions. Then there's the G20. Actually, there's an independent review of these multilateral development banks funding, where there's a launch of global emerging markets data, capital adequacy frameworks. How do you collaborate on hybrid capital, callable capital, on guarantees? All these technical issues were all discussed in that, how to reformulate multilateral development banks and how to take them forward. The IMF quota system. And then, of course, the ambition of sort of trying to raise, which the US announced, and it probably be agreed, but $100 billion in voluntary SDRs, special drawing rights of the IMF, and $2.6 billion of grants. So that. Then the last part, a little bit on technical transformation and the digital public infrastructure, which earlier speakers also referred to, including in the introduction. So global, in that, of course, India has done the India stack, the Aadhaar, the Jandan, and the JAM Trinity and all that. We don't need to repeat all that. But there, a global digital public infrastructure repository to be set up in India. So India will be the host to that. There's going to be the One Future Alliance, how this can be shared with the global south. Cyber education and awareness of children and the youth. Then we come to fostering the digital ecosystem. How do you sort of make it more accessible and sort of spread it out among the population? Harnessing AI. All these have economic impacts. I mean, they don't these are not just issues in a different domain. They all have repercussions and they all cost money and they have a payoff. Similarly, in AI, there were principles as far back as 4 or 5 years back. In 2019, the G20 had already formulated the principles on how to harness AI and how they can be used to plug in to achieve SDGs. Then international taxation. A committee has been set up to report on that. That will cover real estate also transactions. Multilateral convention on this, on international taxation, is to come out. And then coming to gender equality, there's a gender digital divide. How the role of women in climate action, in food security, in nutrition, in well-being. The working group on empowerment of women was set up. So again, very important, because it's been noticed, of course, that no country has really progressed too much economically if the role of women is not recognized and they aren't part of the workforce. Unfortunately, the data for the last few years in India's case is showing a declining participation of women in the workforce. So we need to anyway look at how to improve it in India and, of course, on the G20 countries. Financial sector issues. There's this FIRE, what they call, Format for Incident Reporting and Exchange. Very interesting acronym, FIRE, but financial sector issues. Then how do you sort of counter terrorism and money laundering? We're always trying to get into a more inclusive world. I mean, the other things, of course, I said climate finance, this global debt vulnerabilities, the question that you asked about, the Global Biofuel Alliance, cryptocurrencies. So all this was discussed about. But to take on finally your question about the global debt vulnerabilities, there was already a system put in place 2-3 years back called the DSSI. So there was a common framework and there was discussion on how to take it beyond that. And specifically Zambia, Ghana, Ethiopia, how are they to be dealt with? And Sri Lanka, of course, is outside this framework. So how they were dealt with. So there was some movement on this global debt vulnerabilities of how to take it forward. So that's my summary. And I'm open to questions on any of these subjects that I spoke about or otherwise, whatever.
Thank you, sir. So basically, what you have done in 10 minutes is to summarize the whole, outcomes that India has achieved so beautifully and covered all the aspects. I've already written into the chat whenever participants have a question, they will write. So one major point that I took from your intervention right now was that there was forward movement. In previous issues, forward movement in new issues, and forward movement to continue once the presidency gets over. So when it comes to debt vulnerability, we have generated some impetus into the discussion, as you rightly pointed out. There are other global challenges as well when it comes to developing countries. And one of the major one which features into my mind, and I think into all of our panelists here as well, is the issue related to climate finance as well as related to sustainable development goals. So, sir, the question is how the global south, developing countries as well as emerging markets will benefit from the sustainable development goals and climate finance through the reforms of the multilateral institutions.
In 2010, the developed countries promised $100 billion on the table annually to meet this challenge. That has not been delivered till now, but I'm told that we are expecting that this year in 2023, finally for this year it will be developed. It will be delivered. But that does not. So we need to keep plugging in on that there was a promise made and they need to honor it. But in addition to that, in this G20, what was realized was that we are now beyond talking in billions. We actually need trillion. So the figure actually quoted was 5.8 to 5.9 trillion before 2030 for developing countries to implement their NDCs, as they call it, nationally determined targets. So they need about just short of $6 trillion. And $4 trillion is specifically for the clean energy transition technology to reach net zero by 2050. So this is a huge amount of money, which of course will not necessarily come from any particular one institution. So we will need to look at different models and different. So one will be, of course, the multilateral. Can you hear me? I don't know. I think you have switched, your camera switched off, Parul, or I don't know if the others are able to listen.
So the camera is on as well. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, okay, I got you. I was wondering because I couldn't see. I was wondering what happened. I didn't want to be talking to a blank screen. So okay. So I think everybody can hear me. Yeah. So what I was mentioning was that so the funding will come. First is the intent, and sort of you got to know how much you need. So hopefully, and then people are seeing the effects of not funding it. That is also now coming out more and more clear, and it is coming out across the world. So it is not restricted to any particular country or somebody is especially suffering extra. So this sort of events are happening across. Everybody's getting the sense and feel of it. So that realization has dawned. And the most important part that when you talk to bankers and other people, they feel that there's still a lack of bankable projects. So for private funding to come. But multilateral development bank funding is beginning to come in. That can be leveraged, of course, as chartered accountants and financial analysts, you can leverage that funding and raise much more than what will come in. So they're expecting immediately $100, $200 billion, which if you easily leverage it, you can raise $1 trillion or a little over $1 trillion. And then you get into private funding with bankable projects. So we need to work on that literally in mission mode to sort of get those projects off the ground. But earlier also, like in para 18 of the Glasgow Climate Pact, developed countries were expected to at least double their contributions. So they have not done it. So we need to remind them. They were reminded again in this G20 that, look, you had promised that. You had promised $100 billion in 2010. Please sort of deliver on that. So that is what has pushed them to deliver now. Of course, they've taken time. It's been too slow. But I guess things will speed up as the situation gets a little more serious.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for sharing those factual positions and numbers. I'm sure, when we talk about climate financing, we also talk about technology transfer, we also talk about capacity building. And India, as the chair of President of the G20 presidency, had created a huge political impetus on these discussions through both finance as well as Sherpa track. A slightly related topic, we have observed a historic moment in global energy sector with the launch of the Global Biofuels Alliance at the G20 event. So the question to you is, how do you think this alliance is going to act? Will it act as a counter to the OPEC organization?
I don't think it needs to be looked at like that, and it won't probably. It's not really a counter to the OPEC. It's a completely different sort of concept because firstly, it's 19 countries, 12 international organizations. The biggest difference between OPEC and the Global Biofuel Alliance is that the OPEC was only the producers, the oil producers, whereas this is oil producers, oil consumers, and international organizations. So this is a completely different sort of structure of people who are in it. Secondly, they are trying to encourage people to use biofuel. OPEC is not trying to encourage anyone to use oil. Everybody knows about it, you know. So there's a different purpose for it. Thirdly, the biofuel is only likely to be a transition fuel. The real energy is going to be green hydrogen, which is going to come up maybe in the next decade. And fourthly, OPEC is not going anywhere because these fossil fuels are still going to be used for quite some time to come. So India and the world will not be able to sort of completely move away from fossil fuels. Whatever your mix and however you change it and however quickly you do it, you will only start improving the efficiency of that. It'll become less polluting. But the fact that you will be using it is clear for the next, 30 years, 25, 30, 40 years, you will be using this oils. And so this global biofuel alliance is different in that sense, in all these ways that I mentioned. But it will have a huge impact because if we are trying to raise it, the blending to about 20% is the target. I've told that even if it raises, if we manage to raise the blending by 1%, over 5 lakh farmers are benefited. So you can imagine if you raise it to 20%, how many million farmers will get benefited. Even the stubble that today, I mean, it's going to be soon in Delhi, all of us are sitting here, many of us. So we're going to start feeling the effects of stubble burning. That will start being used as and come out in this, So there's this broken grain will be used here. So it's a huge technical sort of advancement in that sense. So we will, through this Global Biofuel Alliance, try to encourage India, Brazil, US are the 3 biggest promoters, the 3 biggest users, and the countries we've gone furthest. But the others, we want to bring them on board so that it becomes a fuel of choice elsewhere in the world also.
Thank you, sir. I also kind of agree with the idea that, this initiative is more like an impactful initiative and showcases the action-oriented nature of India's positive agenda as G20 presidency, as well as, again, representing the voice of the global south. The next question is on the new mega economic corridor that we have developed. So, in a bid to stimulate economic development through enhance connectivity as well as to increase economic integration, how do you think this new economic corridor that links India with UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and the EU create opportunities for Indian companies?
There'll be huge opportunities because this is really a massive project and it makes sense from all angles, starting with the geopolitical angle, which was mentioned also by the earlier speakers, that it may be an alternative to the BRI. So there is that part of it. And therefore, a lot of countries have stakes in this and they want it to succeed. The Saudi Arabia has already committed $20 billion to the project. The other countries will come on board. The fact that they've already said that within 2 months, the next meeting of the senior officials will take place to sort of thrash out the formalities, that how will it go forward, the customs regulations, the synchronizing of the rail tracks, the way the containers are going to be sort of what size, all those little details to make it a seamless transfer. And it'll end up saving 40% in travel time. So, for any businessman, 40% is a huge number. And if it can save, normally it takes 18 days for a ship to sail from Mumbai to Europe, to south of France, Marseille, or to Greece, Piraeus, or whichever port on that coast, Mediterranean coast. But this will take 10 days. So from 18 days, you're down to 10 days. So that straight away will cut down not only shipping costs, transit time, investment of money, the amount of time that person has money is held up before the goods reach. So all those benefits are there, and a lot of the infrastructure already exists. I mean, firstly, it's going to go by ship, so that doesn't need an infrastructure. It'll be just going on ship. Then the rail links already exist there. They just need to be sort of coordinated and tied up. But what is very interesting is that there's also going to be a fuel, sort of a green hydrogen pipeline, there's going to be electricity pipeline, and there's going to be a data pipeline. So there are going to be 3 additional pipelines along the corridor. So that will make it even more viable. So Indian companies in logistics, transportation, infrastructure building, telecom, electricity, green hydrogen, all of them are going to have tremendous growth opportunities the minute this thing starts flowing.
Um, I think in your initial remarks, when you were, listing down all the achievements of the Indian presidency, one of the key issues that you pointed out was on crypto assets.
Sorry?
Crypto assets.
Crypto assets.
Right. So India's G20 presidency had a very focused discussion, and they were able to build consensus on policy discourse and regulations around new technologies such as blockchain and crypto. So what do you think has been our key achievements in this domain, and how do you think it is going to help developing countries, India, especially when we talk about crypto assets? It's something which we want to, always we are more engaged in the discussions around crypto.
Yeah, there was a long time that people felt that crypto assets actually need to be banned. We need to take them off the table, and they are a danger. And so the biggest sort of achievement that came out from here was by talking to all other G20 partners. We realized that you can't ban it. It's sort of already there. It's in use. It's in existence. What you can do is you can regulate it. You can supervise it. You can have an oversight over it, but you can't really ban it. So that was the biggest achievement in that sense, that you get to realize that's what all these meetings are all about. When you see and the other people share their experiences, you share your experiences. So there is a financial stability board. So the IMF and the FSB has met. They've included a roadmap and how will this be taken forward. Specific points for emerging markets and developing economies have been talked about. And there's going to be a Marrakesh meeting coming up next month, where Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman ji is going to be going there. So that's where it'll be taken forward, this discussion. So that was where the crypto part was in the G20 left.
Right. So crypto, we, as we pointed out, IMF and FSB, there is a much awaited, synthesis paper that they will be coming out soon. And the presidency has also, as we pointed out, focused on the emerging economies and its macroeconomic implications that are arising from crypto assets and the perspectives that we need to see from an EMD point of view. So if I think we have reached if you can agree, then I do have some questions lined up.
Yeah, please.
So the first question is by so the question is whether important given for win-win situation for all with peace through prosperity, mutual cooperation.
Sorry, your voice is echoing. I couldn't catch the question.
So is this better now?
A little better, yeah.
Okay. So the question is whether important given for win-win situation for all with peace through prosperity and mutual cooperation.
No, I didn't follow it, or I'm not getting it. It's not very clear to me what exactly is the question. Also, yeah.
Sir, question is in Q&A section.
Yeah.
And the question is, Parulji, should I repeat the question? There is some issue with your side. Question is whether importance given for win-win situation for all with peace through prosperity, mutual cooperation.
The person wants to know that peace through mutual prosperity, it's what's the?
I think so basically it's kind of linking to the our theme of Vasudeva Kutumbakam. But the question is, I think someone can clarify or they can rewrite the question. In the meanwhile, sir, we can take up another question.
Yeah, please.
Sir, his point is that whether it's a win-win situation for all of us, for all the countries, with peace through prosperity and mutual cooperation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I think too much of focus on this economic thing, and yeah, thankfully, Mr. Bhadwa has got in. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think COVID showed us that, no, that you can't just cut off your borders. So, nobody's safe until the last guy is safe. That was a classic. I mean, we used to talk about it so much, but until COVID came, it's not sunk in. And now I think it was sunk in. Because it has to be a win-win. Everybody has to be on board. Peace and cooperation is the only way that the world. So everybody will win only if the last man is also winning, and that's why we got Africa in, by the way. Because otherwise you can't continue by leaving. And by the way, that's why the G20 was formed. So if you actually look at it, G7 was there. So why did they have to have a G20? Well, the G7 is good enough. They thought they were, doing everything correct. They knew what needed to be done. But then Lehman Brothers collapse happened, and they could have imagined it. And then they said, look, we don't have India there, we don't have China there, we don't have Brazil there. I mean, how are we going to solve this thing? Therefore, they got all of us into the group. The G20 was sort of formed with the Asian financial crisis, and then the Lehman Brothers collapsed. So, and then now we've got Africa. So until everybody is sort of on board, a little bit like the mini United Nations, but the United Nations gets into much more, it's 195 countries. So it gets more complicated to get, 195 countries on board. Here the 20, 21, European Union, AU, so they roughly cover about 85%, 90% of the world population and as organization. So you can take it forward in a much quicker way, reach consensus and take it forward.
Thank you, sir. There's one more question. It's a slightly bigger question, sir. I'll read it out, but I'll also request if you can, open the Q&A section of the Zoom chat as well. So the question is, giving a brief background on India's presidency, which is covering a combined 85% of global GDP and 75% of international trade, which is truly a wide and encompassing reach and afforded India a big stage to leverage global trade and services. So for a developing country like India, how do you see its impact on India's economic development, especially in terms of upgrading to modern infrastructure? So you rightly pointed out this point in your initial remarks as well when you were talking about the financing city tomorrow. The other aspect which the question is touching is how we are leveraging digital technology for societal development and skilled manpower, given that India has a large population, a substantial workforce with growing income.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, so yeah, it's very important and very critical. I mean, if we don't leverage it, we'll really lose the opportunity. So we have managed to, and we have actually leveraged it. So we need to further, like for example, we talked about, let's say, green agriculture. Let's just take the field of agriculture. So why did we propose millets? So millets is firstly health from an individual, you get more nutrition, and it doesn't use that much water like rice or wheat to cultivate. So it is a eco-friendly grain, and it's traditionally grown in India. A lot of the world doesn't know about it. So we promoted it as the International Year of Millets. So we not only have a problem, but we proposed a solution also to it. Similarly, in the health sector, vaccines, medicines, and all that. In renewable energy, we have already proposed the International Solar Alliance, which by the way has been in existence for 7-8 years, India and France. Over 100 countries are now signed up on the International Solar Alliance. And now we have the Global Biofuel Alliance. So India is coming out as a country that not only highlights the problems of the global south, it also has solutions to it. Similarly, the digital public infrastructure. It's a huge to be able to transfer benefits online with no leakages and at the click of a button. So the person is able to get whatever direct benefit transfers, is able to do transaction. So this sort of putting up this digital stack is again solving a problem. The last mile connectivity, there were lots of leakages. We all know what happened in ration shops. I mean, maybe Parul is too young to remember that, but I think many of the people in the audience, Mr. Vadwa and I will be knowing that, what used to happen when we used to go to ration shops for sugar and rice and all that. So all this is now sort of getting solved by this digital infrastructure coming in place and different systems of delivery of these services. So we are therefore able to we take advantage of it, and the world takes advantage of the solutions that we have come up with. And by the way, some of them have solutions that we can benefit from also. So let me tell you that also, that I was served in Kenya, and you'll be surprised at the fintech in Kenya, how advanced that is. So, so they have solutions and to problems that we may like to sort of learn from them. That's one part. And the second part of that question was about skilled manpower. Japan's population today is 120 million. In the next 40 years, 35, 40 years, is going to drop to 80 million. They're going to have a huge problem and a shortage of people to look after caregivers, nursing, teaching, all these jobs. Who's going to do it? So India is the one which has the population, which has the people who are getting trained, who can step in and fill the gap. And Japan is just one particular example I took. This is true of the Nordics, many of the countries there. It's true in many of the Central European countries also. So populations are stabilizing and declining. So India has the sort of manpower. So we need to actually make sure that they get properly educated, properly skilled training. That's why the skill gap analysis, a global mapping of where it's required, so that we can feed into that requirement and negotiate that in all our FTAs. So all the new FTAs that are being negotiated, by the way, there's a huge part on movement of people, what's called Mode 4, movement of personnel in that FTA agreements.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you for putting into perspective the economics behind the G20, and also for I want to quote one statement which you made, which I personally feel is the most impactful statement. That we not only discussed the global challenges, we brought out solutions, and solutions which are more forward-looking, solutions which are not one-time, but they will be continued to be taken forward when India, as part of the Troika for the G20 and for future presidencies. So, sir, thank you so much for all the insightful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Parul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shablaji. Thanks a lot, Parulji. It was a wonderful deliberation, very insightful. We discussed so many things. We have learned a lot, and hopefully we all have gained too much. Now it's time to invite Anil Sarmaji for concluding remark and formal vote of thanks. Over to you, Sir Anilji. Sir, please.
Thank you, Sandeep. It was a very thoughtful and very, very, I would say, intellectual discussion which we have just heard. And I would like to really express my deepest thanks to both the dignitaries, Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee as well as Ambassador Rahul Chhabraji. And both the sessions were very well, I would say, dealt with by our Naval Bajaj and Madam Parul Gulati ji. Just to sum up what actually the takeaways from today's webinar, I would say that Mr. Gopal Krishna Agarwal, he explained us, he highlighted, in fact, two important points that, the digital public infrastructure for public good is one thing which India has really presented to the entire world, where all these our public schemes which are for the benefit of the downturn, how they can be used to the best of their ability, and this is definitely a gift to the nation from Bharat. And similarly, he also highlighted that by the entire proceedings in G20, the socio-cultural and economic initiative which our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has taken, has really established India's image in the world, and it is definitely going to give us a boost in future, where definitely we are going to play a very important role in the entire gamut of world developments with regard to whether it is economic or social sectors. Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee ji, she very lucidly explained the reason how we could, how this India could get the consensus for the Delhi Declaration. There were diverse forces, whether it was Russia, China, US, EU, but still we could have a consensus declaration. And very interestingly, all the 83 paragraphs which are there in the Delhi Declaration, all are consensus is there, and there is no note or any deviation or any dissent note in any of these 83 paragraphs. It is a big achievement. Then Ambassador Rahul Chhabra ji, and very ably guided by Parul Gulati ji. Then he explained all the issues, economic and financial issues, which has been dealt with in this entire G20 summit, as well as the background. See, there are around 112 outcome documents where various groupings and all these tracks has generated, and each one of them is dealing with all the subjects in a very, very detailed manner, whether it is MSME, which we call it Jaipur Call of Action, it is Goa Roadmap for Tourism. He referred also about the Gandhinagar Roadmap for land degradation. He explained all those, and of course, he very well explained the two initiatives which came by the sideline of G20 declaration, that is Global Biofuel Alliance as well as this mega economic corridor, and how these two initiatives are going to not only help India but also to the entire world, and bringing in this Africa Union as part of as a permanent member is going to have a long-term benefits to India. We could prove that the South-South cooperation, which we talk about, is actually not only talking. We have done. India has done some action on that, and which are very solid. I think these were some of the points which I could gather from today's deliberation, and I am sincerely once again express my deepest thanks to both the speakers as well as both the sessions dealt with Mr. Naval Bajaj as well as Parul Gulati ji, and we are really thankful. And Sandeep ji, I think with this we can conclude today's webinar, and we can go for Vande Mat or Jan Man Gan, our Rashtriya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot.
Just concluding remarks. Just
yes,
one.
sir. Please, sir.
See what happened. Inside story that 5 days before this 9th, they could not reach to the consensus. Then the CEO cleaned the slate, that nothing doing. Let's start from the beginning. So that was the turning point, and they spent 5 days, day and night for this activity, and they just, for what was given in the UN Charter, they just copied it and pasted it. So that was the story behind this success. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for joining. Thank you. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Namaskar.